Hi everyone, Ben DeBono for the Sci-Fi Christian. And if you didn't see it, the caption or video or thumbnail that YouTube Live just took for this was kind of spectacular. So if you've never done YouTube Live, when you're queuing this up, it then takes a picture of you for the default thumbnail. You can upload something separately, which I've done a few times. And I was relighting my cigar, and uh, it felt very appropriate how it came out for a show with dragons. So tonight I'm actually smoking. I don't even know what this is called. So here's what happened today. I was cleaning up my office here a little bit, and I just found this bag of cigars I ordered a while ago, and then sat down and forgot about. Thankfully, there's a Boveda pack in there, which if you don't know about cigars, that keeps the Boveda packs are designed for keeping specific humidity within a container, or in this case, a Ziploc bag. So thankfully, they were fine. But I'd ordered these and just forgotten about them. So this thing is um, the Obrigado. I think it's from, I'm pretty sure this is from the same place I was smoking from last week, and I liked that one, so I ordered more, and then promptly forgot that they existed. So that happens sometimes, I guess. I order too many cigars. Oh, well, wow, what an episode! The best of the season for sure. But there is one major complaint, and I've been very positive on this show, but I'm gonna rip something big time right now. And I've brought this up before, but tonight it went from being obnoxious to a serious problem, and that's the lighting. Okay, there were long stretches of this episode where you could not see what was happening. I paused it and I adjusted the brightness settings and picture settings on my projector just so I could see what the hell was going on. They need to correct this in season two. Okay, I love this show. The rest of this episode is going to be positive, positive, positive. Like, I have nothing bad to say about this episode except this, but this is a big thing. This is like the Christopher Nolan dialogue problem, which kind of started bad around the Dark Knight Rises, and then by the time we get to Tenet, you can't hear a damn thing they're saying for half the time in that movie because the audio mix is so bad. Um, Same problem here. Well, not the same problem, but same type of problem here. You cannot see what is happening, even while there are great, important plot developments taking place. I've praised the cinematography. I love it. I love the set design. I even am on board with a darker look. I think it fits for the world with this sort of dingy atmosphere, but they need to fix this. It is taking away from the enjoyment of the show. And tonight, it was such a big problem for such long stretches. The lighting is just not acceptable on this show right now. Okay? So everything else is going to be positive in this episode. I have nothing else bad to say about this episode. I thought it was damn near perfect. In fact, I would go so far as to say, take the whole Game of Thrones franchise. We have not had an episode this good in the franchise since season 6, since those last couple episodes of season 6. Great work all around. But if you can't see what's happening, and you can't see what's happening at one of the best moments in the series, which is where Aemond is mounting Vagar, and he takes him for his own, and it's such a critical moment. I'm going to talk a lot more about that in such a beautifully shot scene. But the fact that you can't see without adjusting the brightness settings on your TV is a problem. And it's hurting the enjoyment of the show. It's hurting the experience of watching it. They need to fix it. Okay, that's rant over, but I want to stress that's not a minor point in my opinion. It has crossed over the line from, I guess, rant, not quite over, from obnoxious and sort of, that's a little annoying, to actually hurting the show. I'm sure it's not going to be any better the last few episodes. Season 2, they need to fix this. Okay, now let's get to the episode, and what an episode it was. So, uh, everybody's going to be talking about the second half and the ending and everything. We're going to talk a lot about that. Uh, I just want to praise the first half of this episode because this is something that the show is doing so well. So the season's essentially a prologue season, right? You know, the main conflict that's brewing and building and in some ways already here, it's rising to the surface. But this season is going to feel different than the entire rest of the show's run. It's, you know, we've had a lot of time jumps. We're going to get one more minor time jump next week. I won't give away anything about the preview for next week if you don't want to watch it, but a few of the child actors are going to be replaced by slightly older actors. So I don't think it's a huge time jump like the last one we had, but we get one more time jump here next week. So prologue season, and like that could really work against the show's against the show and what it's trying to accomplish, but it hasn't. Why? Because rather than just sitting around feeling like, yeah, okay, characters interesting, but when's the good stuff gonna start? They have this sort of boiler that's just slowly gaining pressure, and you can just feel it. And then at moments like the second half of this episode, where things start to explode, and then maybe they're clamped down a little bit, but just barely hanging on. The reason those moments can work so well is because of moments like the first half of the episode, where we've got everybody there. They're all bought into this lie, kind of, or at least they're all accepting this lie. It's like there's the reality, and everyone knows it. And then there's the unspoken lie that they've all are having to buy into because Viserys is like just asserting his will to keep this lie going. You know, the funeral was so good, and the moment the comparison I kept thinking of is in Gladiator towards the beginning when Marcus Aurelius is walking with his daughter, whose name I can't remember. It's been forever, too long since I've watched that great movie. And, you know, he says to her, let's pretend I'm a good father and you're a loving daughter. And she says, this is a pleasant fiction. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, they've kind of, I'm sure they're not intentionally referencing that moment, but they've kind of taken what's going on in that moment in Gladiator and drawn it out for the whole season. And it's so good. It's like there is this pleasant fiction that Viserys wants everyone, and not only wants, but is by royal fiat tonight, insisting that everybody believes in under penalty of losing your tongue at best. And, you know, they're all, but that everybody knows the real truth. Even Viserys knows the real truth, though he's clearly the most bought in and probably is lying to himself about it. And the tension that's there, just as during this slow, and I don't use slow in a pejorative sense here, opening to the episode is so well done. It's like there's a tinderbox and it's just waiting for that spark to hit, and it hits and it can't quite get out. But it's like the only thing keeping it from blowing up is the fact that Viserys is somehow still alive. Which Viserys' death watch continues for another week. I don't know how the guy is still like surviving all these time jumps. He is not looking good. You know, you're kind of wondering, is he even going to make it through the voyage home? Presumably a little bit longer. I don't know. I honestly thought that Viserys was done this week. In the preview from last week for this episode, they showed, you know, some of the funeral moments, and for whatever reason, I should have assumed it was what's her name's funeral, but I was thinking it was Viserys, and I thought tonight was when he was going to die and things were going to boil over. But nope, we got Viserys for one more week, at least, maybe more. I don't know. Yeah, I keep thinking that the next episode's going to be the last for him, and he keeps defying the odds. But I really liked, you know, Daemon had a great moment in the funeral where he kind of laughs, but it's this sort of, you know, well, I'll give you my interpretation of it, but what I want to say about it, that moment's great because there's so many ways you can take it. Like, is Daemon just this cold-blooded bastard who doesn't care and he's laughing at his wife's funeral? Or, and this was my interpretation, is he somebody who is so messed up and so conflicted inside that he is feeling grief, but that it's also not quite the same grief as maybe it would have been had this been a real marriage, and um, which I guess it was. I mean, they had kids, but he says later in the episode they were happy enough. So it's like, okay, this was not the grand romance of all time. And you get that laugh, and it's like, the way I took it, and again, I think it's open to interpretation, so this is, not the only way to take it, is this is a man who is so conflicted and he's trying to express something, and this is the only way he can do it. Then we have Aegon checking out his sister, but not very impressed. Seems to know that's the way things are going to go for the Targaryen dynasty. A little Targaryen incest, which I guess we got later in the episode. Really liked the scene with Rhaenyra and Corlys, sort of after the funeral. Rhaenyra is saying she wants Driftmark to go to her sons, or her grandsons, I guess, at this point. There's this resentment towards Daemon that's taking place. And then I loved Corlys's response there of history remembers names, not blood. That's a really good line. And it's Corlys's own way of buying into the pleasant fiction. It's like, okay, we can turn our back on these kids who aren't ours. Everyone knows it. But history's about the name. And ultimately, that's true. At least in this time period, and I think even in our time period, though you might put it a little bit differently, like history's less about what literally happens, and it's more about the collective narrative that we choose to buy into. It's like the whole thing of history is written by the victors, which is a little simplistic. It's true in its own way, but it's a little simplistic. But the way I would choose to say that is that history is the record not of what literally happened, but of the collective narrative we buy into. And is there overlap? Yeah, to varying degrees, right? But it's never perfect. It's never perfect. And I liked Corlys calling that out. I also liked Rhaenys calling out his ambition. That this is all, he's not interested so much in doing the right thing. He's not even really interested in his family. He's interested in what he can accomplish. And you see both sides of that. Love the conversation with Rhaenyra and Daemon. Of course, their relationship goes in some interesting directions in this episode. But just love that, it's like they go out for this nighttime walk and there's just this honesty there that doesn't exist and isn't allowed, literally is not allowed to exist anywhere else. We have Otto back as the Hand of the King. So all of this happens, and then we head into the second half of the episode where it's just boom, 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 one thing after another. Okay, I love the scene. Lighting aside, which again, I'm not willing to put it aside. It is a problem. It's a critique. But I love the scene of Aemond stealing the dragon. So good. So good. And he's barely hanging on. It's kind of great because I've been wondering through like all of Game of Thrones with Dany riding the dragons and everything. And then so far in this show, like, they're making it seem a little bit easier than it feels like it would be, which, whatever, it's a show. Who cares? But I love that we did get a scene where he's just barely holding on. I love the way it was shot, outside of the lighting. The scene, the moment where the dragon goes in front of the moon is just beautiful. I found myself comparing it in a very positive sense to the absurd scene in the beginning of season 8 of Game of Thrones, where Jon and Dany are in their like dragon date, where they're that kind of absurd scene where they're flying around. It's like, that was silly, and it didn't hold up at the time or now. And this was great. This is what it looks like to get on top of that dragon. You believed it. You believed that he was on a dragon, and that's what you want. And if you know your Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire world, Westeros lore, which, you know, I'm not an expert on it in a way that some corners of the internet are, so if I make mistakes, eh, whatever. But this is the second biggest dragon compared to Balerion the Black Dread, who was Aegon the Conqueror's dragon, I think. Again, this is one of those moments maybe I'm getting wrong. But we, you know, the Black Dread, Balon, whatever his name was, is long dead at this point. And so this is the biggest dragon that exists and will exist for a long time. And there's so many layers to this. So there's Aemon's own triumph, as we saw him last week. He doesn't have this dragon. He's being mocked for it. And they bring in the pig. Like, who's laughing now? Who's riding the pig now? So great character layer to it. And then you have the layer of these poor kids, of like, this was, you know, their aunt's dragon, their mom's dragon, and then, you know, her body's barely cold, probably not cold after, you know, getting burned like that. And somebody else is claiming the dragon, and so, you know, it plays into the inter-family tension. And then the other great layer to it, which is what Otto brings up later, where he says that, you know, because Aemon says, oh, it was worth it, I got a dragon, they took my eye, fair trade. And Otto brings up, no, it's actually more than that. It's to have that dragon on our side is worth 1,000 times the price he paid. That's the other layer, because of this world, dragons are basically WMDs, right? And so you've got this building tension between these two sides. He just stole the biggest fucking nuke in the other side's arsenal. It's fantastic, and worked so well. You have the fight with the kids then after that, and just the, you know, the brutality of it, from where Aemon's holding the rock and you think he's gonna whack the one little kid, I don't remember their names, and then, you know, it goes in the other direction as he starts accusing them of being bastards, and the one boy knows it and his younger brother doesn't, and the devastation of finding out that way, like, this poor little kid's the only one in this whole situation who hasn't put 2 and 2 together, and you just feel for him there. You know, it's there's something so deeply human about that moment of just the tragedy of it. Like, this kid's got to live with that. Yeah, he's lined up for the throne, so I guess his life isn't that bad in the grand scheme of things, but still, it's like, he thinks Laven's his dad, and then he suddenly finds out that not only is he not, but that everyone else knows the truth. And then, you know, taking the eye, and then we get, you know, the scene I thought was going to be the highlight of the episode, and arguably it is. We'll talk about the ending in just a minute, but the accusation of treason, and there's so much here I wrote down, because I want to just go through this kind of beat by beat, you know. So Viserys loses it, and he loses it, you know, kind of at Aemon, like, where did you hear this? And then Aemon throws it to Aegon. It's like, okay, same question. Where did you hear this? It's just, and Aegon, who's so good, and Ty Tennant's just killing it in this role so far. Everybody knows. He just says the quiet part out loud. You know, the pleasant fiction, it's shattered in that moment. By force of will, Viserys gets it back together, kind of. But just the calling it out loud in front of everybody like that was so good. And Viserys just going nuts, and then Alicent insisting on the eye, and we have, you know, she calls out Kristen Cole, like, oh, get me the eye, and like, this dumb bastard finally makes a smart choice. He's like, oh, I pledge to defend you, I'm not going to take a kid's eye in front of the king. So Kristen Cole, there is a limit to his stupidity, apparently. And then, you know, she comes out Rhaenyra with the knife, and you have that great moment. And then Rhaenyra's saying, now they see you as you are. Oh, it's so good. So good. Otto and Alicent was good. You know, she's like kind of retreating back into her good wife shell, and says it was an ugly act, and Otto comes back with, it's an ugly game that we play. And man, Otto just such a Machiavellian little shit, and just him kind of realizing his daughter's finally in the game. Like, Alicent's had a whole Sansa Stark arc in this entire, for what Sansa went through the entire show, she's gone through in this season. And Otto's absolutely right when she's like, well, what should I do? Go to Viserys, apologize, be nice, blah, blah, blah. Will he forgive me? Well, and then Otto says, what else can he do? It's so true. Like, Otto realizes that, okay, Viserys wants his pleasant fiction, he wants his lie, and on one hand, that's a limiting factor on everybody. You can't do anything about it as long as Viserys is alive. But on the other hand, there is a trap there for Viserys. He can only go so far. If he pushes it with punishment for Alicent, he can't maintain what he wants. And so it's this great back and forth there. Just spectacular. Then we start to get to the final sequence of this episode. And the scene where Layman shows up after just being gone through this whole thing. And, I'll be honest, like, Rhaenyra's kind of pissed at him a little bit first. And you're thinking, okay, she's kind of right in that moment. Because he hasn't been there and all this is blowing up. It's like, okay, you guys have your own little lie that you're living in this agreement and everything. But part of that agreement has to be that you show up and are there for moments like this, and then what he does is so selfless in that moment of, I'm gonna put my lover away, I'm gonna be a husband to you, even though that's not what I want. Like, Layman is so selfless in that moment, and it's such a beautiful scene, and it makes what happens next so tragic. Now, yes, he survives. Yes, they fake his death. But the next scene where Rhaenyra and Daemon are talking, and she just goes full villain at this moment. Like, yeah, we're going to have to kill Layman. And they don't do it literally, lucky for him. But it just takes, like, he's puts himself out there, and he wants to make this sacrifice for her. And for their family and for their kids, even though the kids aren't literally his. When he says, I love them, I think he's telling the truth. And then to have Rhaenyra just go full Machiavellian with Daemon is terrific. Really, really good. And her fire is a prison speech. But then she just owns it. It's like, no, but that's us. We are not of the sea. We are fire. It's like she sees fire as a prison, she names it, but she chooses to not escape it. In fact, she chooses to walk deeper into that prison for the sake of her own ambition. We get the name, so the two sides are going to be, if you've read the book, the greens and the blacks. So the greens are the high towers and Alicent's and everything. And, I'll hold back as far as how all this is going to shake, as far as who's where. But we get the greens named for the first time. That was kind of hinted at when a couple episodes ago when Alicent shows up wearing green. So that was the significance of that. And it's going to continue to play out for the rest of this episode. We get the wedding, we get the pseudo-murder, and the board is set. Man, just such a great ending to this episode. My jaw was just on the floor. Because, yeah, I've read Fire and Blood, and but it's kind of like reading the Silmarillion or something. There's people who know it beat by beat. I've tended to more grab it in the broad strokes when I've read that or Fire and Blood, and so a lot of the details I'm a little shaky on. So didn't remember that. Oh, thank you, Smokey Bear. Yeah, great. I appreciate you enjoying my review, but great episode to respond to. It makes it easy when it's like this. So, just phenomenal tonight. Just phenomenal work. Fix the lighting. fix the lighting, and you got a perfect episode tonight. It's a shame, and that's why I'm ranting about that, because this was a perfect episode marred by a technical choice that didn't need to be that way. Uh, it's a 10 out of 10, except for that, which probably drops it down to a 9 out of 10 or something. Still a great episode. Still the best episode we've had in years of the Game of Thrones franchise. But what a shame that the perfection that was everything else that happened tonight is taken away from in a major way, not even a minor way. It was major by the lighting choices and the technical choices being made. Fix that, because this show is worth it. This show is beginning to fire on all cylinders. I cannot wait for these last 3 episodes. Just phenomenal. All right, that's it for tonight. I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. What a contrast again. Sorry I keep bringing this up, but it just stands out so much to Rings of Power. Again, the contrast I'll highlight there is I brought up this is kind of a prologue season, and so is this season on Rings of Power, but just what a contrast. Watch both of these. One of them is just stumbling around, and it's like, Rings of Power, you're watching it, and you're like, oh, did they forget that there's supposed to be Rings of Power on this Rings of Power show? It sure feels like it. And then this show is just, okay, it's prologue, but we're focused. We're putting up the pieces. You can feel the tension. We're building something. We're bringing you as the audience along with it. Couldn't be a sharper contrast in how to do something like this right. And I'm totally there for it. I'm totally there for Rings of Power too, but that's more for my own entertainment than it is the actual quality of the product. All right, guys. Great episode. That's it. Bandy Bono. Talk to you next week.